Welcome to today's November 2020 meetup. This is a special meetup. I forgot to adjust it here. This meetup is presented not only by us, DotNetDevs.at, but also by the .NET Stammtisch Linz and the Microsoft user group Graz. So quickly, who we are. First, thanks you for joining all. So we are currently at 53 viewers all over the world. I saw someone aus Egypt and someone aus Graz. Cool. .NET what are we? We are a non-profit organization for about sharing knowledge about the .NET technology in Austria. We have a website, we're on Twitter, we are on Twitch. All of our meetups are available on YouTube. And we have also a Slack channel where we are chatting and helping each other out. Quickly the links in the chat. And then Gergely, your part.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Gergely. Welcome everyone. I'm the co-organizer of the .NET Stammtisch Linz, which is a .NET meetup group in Linz. I just looked it up. We started in 2017. We have a meetup group, so we are on meetup.com. We also have a website. You should see both of those on the slides. We usually have 2 talks, and we usually do this in German, but this time, obviously, like we do the whole thing in English. We are always looking for speakers, also for sponsors. So if you want to sponsor a meetup in Linz, or if you want to talk at a meetup in Linz, then you also see an email address on the slide. You can just contact us, and we will be very happy about that. So yeah. One last thing, I'm super happy that we have multiple meetup groups organizing this one. So from Austria, I think that's a huge thing. So yeah, thanks for that to all the other meetup groups. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you. And now, Igor, your part.
Thanks, Andy. Same as Greg, I also have to say I'm really happy that we organized all this together. So I'm a co-lead of the Microsoft Developer User Group Graz. We started a few years earlier in 2015, and we're pretty active. I'm really happy about it. Just past 400 something members, official members in the group. So it's also like a nice thing to celebrate. Before this COVID crisis, we used to meet regularly almost every month in Graz, and now we also have regular talks online. So we stream the talks. And we are constantly looking for good talks and good speakers. So if you have anything on your mind you think you would like to share with the community, just get in touch with either with Bernd or with myself. You can see the contact data on the slide. So that will be it.
Thank you, Igor. Good. Yeah, we are sponsored, and we have to thanks to our sponsor. So this time we have a new sponsor. Microsoft is starting to sponsor us. .NET is now in November. Also thanks to our longtime sponsors Tieto and Rubicon. And also JetBrains is sponsoring us with a JetBrains license, a 12-month JetBrains license. We will have then a shuffle, Verlosung. About it. At the end of the talk, you get a link to feedback formula, and you can then say, I want to participate in the shuffle for the license, and we draw somebody, and we'll send you the license code for one JetBrains product for 12 months. And if you win, please use it before it runs out. If not, you win and have nothing. So some quick news from the community. This meetup is part of the .NET Foundation virtual user group. It's a virtual user group with meetups from all over the world. So some of you will probably found us via this. Join them. And you have meetups all over the world, and make something good about this whole situation that we can't meet in person. Also, news on December 9th, the Microsoft Developer User Group in Graz have also a talk about C#9 and .NET 5 by Igor and Marco. And as far as I know, you will convert a Blazor app from C#9 to C#8 to C#9. Is this correct, Gregor?
Yes, yeah. So we are preparing one, let's say, realistic application. So today we were going also to discuss all these C#9 features, but in 2 weeks we're really going to go in depth and show what you can do with them in one realistic application. So we wrote the application, Blazor application in C#8, use like C#8 and below features, and we will port it to C#9 live coding. So it's going to be a cool demo.
That
Make sure to join.
sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have? We have some other interesting events. So on the 26th of November is the Unity Meetup of Vienna, if you're interested. Then yeah, the Graz with .NET with C#9. On December the 10th, our Das Muli, Martin Ullrich, MS Build Guru, has a webinar with JetBrains about tips and tricks to improve your .NET build setup with MS Build. So if you want to learn something of MS Build, join this. And also we have from our friends Microsoft Austria, they have some cloud transformation workshops with free workshops that you can join and get more Azure and cloud knowledge for free. Good. Where is my mouse cursor? So, and this was it from the news. Let's start with our .NET 5 and C# roundtable, and let's show you all our speakers. So, short introduction. So we have Raoul Holzer on the top left, one of our DotNetDevs.at organizers and working at TechTalk. Then we have Martin Ullrich, also co-organizer of DotNetDevs.at, Microsoft MVP, and working at Tieto. Envy. I'm always Envy. Then we have Alexander Köplinger working at Microsoft on Xamarin.
Nice.
Then we have Gergely. I don't try to pronounce your last name. I don't.
That's fine. It's Kalapos.
Kalapos. Organizer of the .NET Linz Stammtisch. And working at Elastic. And then last but not least we have Igor Rončević.
Wow, I thought you will not dare to pronounce my name either. It was good, we were practicing.
Organizer of the Microsoft User Group Graz and working at Guid.New in Graz with Bernd. Good, let's start into our topics. .NET 5 and C#9. So to the audience on Twitch, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will forward them to our nice table discussion. So, first topic is, so .NET 5 is released and we probably remember this nice graphics, what .NET 5 is and what's the unified platform with desktop, web, cloud. So, what is now in .NET 5? Because as far as I know, the Xamarin part was shifted to .NET 6. Because of COVID, it wasn't possible to finish this in time, so it was postponed to .NET 6. Yeah. Anything else is still there. So we have their desktop with WPF, Windows Forms UWP.
Mm-hmm. So I'm personally specialized for the question what's not inside. Yeah. So I'll pass this what's inside to the other guys, but more or less like that base library. Yeah. Of these big things, definitely the UI libraries for Windows, WPF, WinForms.
Right, and so I think that one of the biggest things is the name actually changed. So it's no longer .NET Core, it's now .NET 5. So throwing off the Google foo from the early .NET 5 previous from 2016, I think, 2014, 15. But still, it's excited. But naming is interesting. So Alex, I believe Xamarin, is this going to stay Xamarin in the future?
Yes, so that's the current plan. Xamarin is still basically the brand for all the mobile pieces. But as you said, .NET 5 is really about unifying the different .NET trains and releases. So you don't have .NET Framework and .NET Core anymore. It's just .NET. And we will have .NET 5 and .NET 6 and .NET 7, .NET 8, and probably a lot more after that. So yeah, it's basically simplifying the story again, rather than having a complicated set of frameworks you need to choose between. So I'm really excited for that.
To put it a bit differently, so it's not only the number, like it's not only like we increase it for from 3 point something to 5, or not 4.8 to 5. There is a lot of symbolic behind it, actually. So exactly this, like joining the trains and so on, like that there will be just one .NET in the future. Yeah. So that's I mean, yeah, in theory, just one new .NET in the future. Yeah. So what's going to be with the existing applications and so on, and the things we do, like in our everyday work, that's the other topic.
Yeah, there will be one .NET that is developed and maintained and enhanced. I saw someone this week a graphic from the .NET framework support is going until 2029 or something currently.
Well, the backstory there is that basically .NET Framework is a component of Windows, and that means it will be supported, which means security fixes and things that break will be fixed as long as Windows is supported. And I think basically the longest support window that Windows currently announced is 2029. So I'm sure it will be supported after that, because
if Windows survive, I mean,
yes,
it's a tough battle. Maybe this is also interesting part. So .NET 3.5 is until 2029, so at least. But 4.8 is going to continue as long as Windows lives. Yeah?
Right.
So on that side, at least, we are pretty sure that we can run at least our applications. But the new stuff will not be there.
That's correct. Yes.
So
if you just want to have something that doesn't change at all, then yeah, you can still pick .NET Framework, but
live happily ever after. Yeah.
Right.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe one thing to this, like we talked about, like this is the unification and there should be one .NET, and I think it's worth to mention that now there is a new like target framework. So previously with .NET Core we targeted either .NET Core App or for libraries .NET Standard, and now with .NET 5 we have this .NET 5.0 target framework, and this is actually a new thing here, because if you only target .NET 5, then there is really no reason to target .NET Standard. So if you target .NET 5 on whatever platform and you create a library, you can just say .NET 5. I guess that won't work on Xamarin, right? So if you still want to target Xamarin, then you need .NET Standard. But once Xamarin will also be on this new one .NET track, which will maybe on .NET 6, then you
not
can
maybe, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not making promises here. I don't work there, but yeah, you can. And from that point, you can just target .NET 6 in that case. And with that target framework, you can basically target, I wouldn't say everything, because if you want to target .NET Framework or .NET Framework, that will not work there, obviously. But the idea is here that the target framework itself also targets more and more versions of .NET.
Yeah,
and also if you look at...
no, please, Martin, please.
And also if you look at how the sausage is made, like it's now like one big GitHub repository. So the number of GitHub repositories involved in like building Mono, the CLR, the runtime libraries, the core, the app host, core setup, the SDK installer, the CLI. I think this is all like consolidated. There's .NET Runtime, there's an SDK, there's ASP.NET Core, and basically that's it.
Martin, thanks. This is the part I'm actually excited about. So, once when you have that kind of a cleanup, and like in your own house, I'm really sure that the development will be much faster. I mean, like in a positive sense, that the new stuff will come that will really catch up with the future and be able to create it actually. So when you have, like this kind of I will not say mess, but like a complexity in your pipelines and the development process and different code bases, it's really difficult to innovate on a fast pace. Yeah? And this is something I expect. Similar thing which happened to C# as a language. It started really innovated really quickly. Yeah? I expect this also with .NET. Yeah? Maybe just to reflect a bit on what Gergely said, .NET standard is still not obsolete. That's very important to understand that .NET 5 doesn't make .NET standard obsolete. So as long as you have to live between these two worlds, the framework and the .NET 5 Plus, .NET standard is still there to help.
Yeah, there we have .NET Standard 2.0 and 2.1. Who is supporting 2.1 except .NET Core 3.1?
Mostly Xamarin and .NET Core.
So Xamarin is on 2.1. Cool.
Yeah. So there are a few APIs, I think like span, that are in .NET Standard 2.1 that are not in 2.0. And if you want to use those, you can target .NET Standard 2.1. Of course, if you don't need to support .NET Framework, because .NET Framework only supports 2.0, not 2.1. So if you want to share between like the older Xamarin and .NET Core, then you could use .NET Standard 2.1. But hopefully in the future, we will just have .NET 5 and .NET 6, and that's everything you will ever need, hopefully.
Cool. One question from the viewers is there do you know about any information about unifying, integrating Unity with .NET X? So I would say something like after 5.
I don't think I have anything to say about that right now. But yeah, I think Unity is interested in getting on this, but regarding when or how they will do it, I think that's still being planned.
Are they still on the old Mono stuff, or did they already upgrade it?
They upgraded the Mono that they're using to a more recent one, but it's still using the .NET Framework-based Mono, basically. So yeah, if you're targeting Unity, that would also be another case where you would still stick with .NET Standard 2.0.
Cool. Good. Yeah, we already talked a little bit about .NET Standard. That's still relevant for stuff, but there will be no newer version of .NET Standard.
No.
Hey, we got one standard less than. As we next topic, and there was also a question about this, and you mentioned already .NET 5, .NET 6, .NET 7. So what is now happening is that every November, I would assume every time for .NET Conf, a new major release of .NET is released, and
right,
every second one is a long-term support version, so 6, 8, 10, and so on.
Right.
And it's I think that the rules didn't change, so it's supported for at least 3 years or 3 months after the next LTS or something.
I think the 3 months rule is for the non-LTS, so the current releases. But LTSs themselves, I think they are supported for 3 years.
3 years, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. And now the question is, could these long support cycles cause bad habits of not updating to new versions?
Well, I guess these support cycles, even though they are some are shorter, some are longer, but they are not as long as .NET Framework, right? So also the question is, should you target like a current version or an LTS version? And I've seen a lot of different discussions around, and my personal recommendation is, if you write a project and you intend to not touch it for a longer time, use an LTS version. But if you're actively working on a project, so if you're now starting right now to develop a new project, and you're probably likely be supporting that in a year from now, then start with .NET 5 and then upgrade to an LTS version, right? Because there is no point in using a previous LTS version and then spending a week or two maybe updating from .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 6 in like a year from now, or maybe in 2 years from now. So my personal recommendation is even try using current version if you are actively working on a project.
And on top of that, to your question, Andy, is it is it going to the long-term support version, which is not that long? If you think of it like at least for many of my customers, like 3 years is nothing. Like the application lived for decades, so to say. And I hope this is my personal hope that the situation will change actually. So what .NET, like the framework, the classical framework taught us is, we build things once and it's going to stay backward compatible forever, and it's going to be maintained for the next couple of centuries. And so I've seen plenty of applications which are still like literally old, yeah, and struggling in many ways to modernize, yeah. And there's a lot of, let's say, the mindset and the psychology behind it. If you come into that mindset, software is something that lives, that has to be refactored, upgraded, and so on. Then switching to a new version is for me just one of the part of that process. And once when you're on .NET 5, moving to 6, moving to 7, maybe let's say it will be comparable like with the changes in .NET 4 or whatever. But it's really, for me, it's also if the application is properly written in terms of architecture and so on. It's easy to, let's say, dispose certain parts and staying on the cutting edge and getting the benefits.
Yeah, and I also think that it's a really big question, like where are you coming from, right? So if you have a .NET framework, super old application, then previously, right, with .NET Core 3, that like migrating to that was close to impossible. With .NET 5, now you have the chance to, maybe move that specifically like WPF, WinForms. Now is your chance to maybe move there. If you are coming from .NET Core, for example, ASP.NET Core on .NET Core 3.1, the move to .NET 5 is really, I personally don't have, yeah, exactly.
Should be easy.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it should be very easy.
No, this I'm definitely not advocating moving the existing applications which are on .NET framework, especially. I've seen really a lot. It's like, and close to impossible in many cases. And the question is why to do it. Yeah, especially if you move it to 4.8, you're going to have a supported system for a long time. But for the new development, that's my thought. That's my hope that in general we adopt the mindset of literally like renewing and refactoring applications. That this is a simpler part of the internal development culture.
Yes, and I have to say, even now that we have Blazor, I have to admit, even migrating old, like custom control style ASP.NET classic applications can now somehow move to a newer version, because you can rewrite some components that if you have that component-based architecture, you can make something similar with Blazor actually. So
yeah,
yes, sometimes it has to be the rewrite, but you can like stick to an old architecture a bit and create new controls.
Yeah, and for LTS, so for me it's so LTS means Microsoft. You can call somebody at Microsoft and he's looking into your problems if you have previous support. So if you're paying for support, that means, so depending on your customer or your project, perhaps they have no support contract with Microsoft, so why then staying on LTS? Security fixes will be fixed, yes, but depending on your how you deploy it, you have to update it. There is one because I'm saying now how you deploy. There's one question from the viewers if can .NET 5 support different versions of 5x runtimes side by side? And yes, that's the reason for .NET Core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as .NET Core. So you will have the different SDK versions. And I guess I still have the release candidate on my machine because I tested with that. And a couple of days ago, I installed the final release. So, and then at some point, obviously, I will use the old one.
Yeah, maybe we should throw in a bit of those other benefits of what's in terms of a framework, but exactly these kind of benefits, which you're getting actually with moving to .NET 5. Yeah, like these kind of things, like side by side execution and so on. There are plenty of goodies in .NET 5. Yeah.
I think during the preview of .NET 5, I think I have over 20 different versions on my PC because I try to use every version of .NET 3.1 and 5. And so there are a lot of mess on when you test every preview. And have to clean up afterwards. And sometimes Visual Studio uninstalled some versions where you have a project on.
Yeah, I have a couple nightly builds installed because if you didn't know, you can go to github.com/.net/installer and you can download nightly builds of the .NET SDK from there. So, and those all installed side by side without any problems. So if you don't need it anymore, you just delete the folder and it's gone.
Yeah, this is actually a really nice point. Like if you work on a, let's say, .NET Core 3.1 application, you have that on your machine, you can work with that, target with that, do the whole development with that, and then you can side by side install like .NET 5 and you can just experiment with it without hurting your machine. So this is pretty safe, and I have never seen that this wouldn't work. So I think since .NET Core 1.0, this works very well. So you can mess up your machine.
And there is still the option of deploying the runtime alongside with your application. So you can create self-contained deployments and basically ship a runtime. Only caveat is if there are any security updates, like patch updates, you will have to redeploy your application, rebuild and redeploy.
Yeah, I think I made a talk a year ago how to get some application in production, and that there was all the details about publishing and so on. I see if I can find it. It should still be relevant. Yeah, for the side by side. So for some keywords that our viewers know how to do it. So on the development side, you have the global JSON to pin to a SDK, to exact version, or to some you want 3.1 SDK. And then on the application side, you can configure role forwarding if your application should automatically roll forward. It's like you compiled it for 3.0 and should it also run when you only have the 3.1 runtime. Then you can have a roll forward option that it's already using this. It's in the app settings JSON files, and I remember correctly.
To this topic, like the self-contained applications, like some of the other nice things. I mean, we have them in .NET Core also, but for .NET 5, they're getting like better, more stable single file deployment. Works in a different way. Works better. Like it's not like unzipping somewhere and getting it. And also, I'm not sure if you tried trimming. So far, I didn't have a chance really to try it in some like production ready application. Okay, officially it's still experimental, but it's really promising, and it's interesting to see how much Microsoft is pushing that direction, like this new C#9 language feature called the code generators. Exactly, that's right, to it so that the trimming works better, let's say. And there is a super cool project. I have to take a look what the person did. It's called C# Snake. You know, like that Asian snake game where the snake goes and eats apples and so on. It's a console application, and it was compiled down to 8 kilobytes. which was like I couldn't believe like that you can have a .NET application stripped down to 8 kilobytes. I have to take a closer look what was done, but it's more or less combining different runtime options and compile options and so on. Yeah. Just
Cool. We got some questions from the viewers before I forgot them. So there is some question about plans for server-side WCF.
uh-huh.
That
So
will never happen.
that's my area. Like, what's not there? That's what people usually ask me. Yeah.
The short answer is no, and there's a long answer.
No. Yeah. There is always
USDRPC.
a long answer. Actually, I usually answer with a question like, "Show me what you have." It literally depends on that. But maybe just to sketch the possibilities, like really quickly, when it comes to WCF, what Microsoft recommend is gRCP, which is, let's say, writing it from the scratch. Yeah.
Yep.
More or less, so the fulfills the same purpose, but it's less, let's say, writing from the scratch. There is a one project. It's called Visual Recode. Yeah, I think it's Visual Recode. Actually, what it does, it generates ASP.NET Core backend based on your VCF backend. So this is also something we're trying. It's a commercial product, but this is something which can, let's say, help. And there is an open source project called Core WCF, but it's in a very, very early stage. And knowing how crucial WCF was for those who were using it, I'm not sure that at that stage I would go into that direction. It's a really like very still in its infancy. Yeah. So very short answer.
I just looked it up on GitHub. It has 144 commits. I think WCF has a little bit more.
Well, there's a small trick there, because Core WCF uses the WCF sources that were published by Microsoft. So it's basically it's just a port of WCF server side to .NET Core, but it's not an officially supported product by Microsoft. So.
Oh, but good news! They officially supported the client side libraries. They exist before. Yeah. So if you want to really change the clients, that's a good news at least. Yeah.
But they mentioned at the .NET Conf during the talk, there were also the question if WCF will be supported. There is the company which make this open source is a company in Redmond near to Microsoft. Maybe some old Microsoft employees, and they work close together with Microsoft that they get this running and getting better. So there is a company behind this which delivers support for WCF in the core, but I don't know in which direction. They mentioned during the .NET Conf. We will see.
Yeah,
but it's also interesting why people would need. Why people would actually need WCF. And one thing that I've been doing in the past was just having a separate project that hosts a WCF interface that I may need to provide to customers to keep existing integrations. But then this API, this backend would just translate the calls to REST calls to a ASP.NET Core API. So you can think of it as a microservice that just adapts your interface, be it gRPC or JSON REST calls, and then hosts a WCF layer to provide this existing compatibility interface. So.
Yeah, that's I think is a really good point. So I would rather just keep the officially supported .NET framework with WCF with IIS, and I can call Microsoft rather than going into a framework which is not officially supported and maybe doesn't work that well. So yeah.
This is in general the first question to ask. Actually, if you're talking about porting something to something else, is it worth doing it? So what are the real reasons for doing it? I'm in general like a fan of that. There are plenty always of good reasons, but there are a lot of situations where it simply does not pay off. No matter which direction to go. Even in this smart init, in this case, if I got you well, I still, if I had my logic in WCF, this is also the question how the original application was structured. If I had my logic there, there is still plenty of refactoring to get it out, to core and leave WCF just as a facade.
Yeah, maybe question for the audience. Does anyone use this core WCF in production? Write in the chat. I really want to talk to the people who use this.
Good. Let's switch to the next topic. Question was, what can I expect as a data scientist in general, and will be there something new in .NET 5? The Jupyter notebooks is the first thing I get into my mind. That should also run.
I mean,
Yeah, and also
ML.NET is there. Okay, yeah, Jupyter notebooks. That's definitely nice. ML.NET is there. It will be developed like continuously. Yeah, I'm not that much in data science. Like this supports for like Arc, whatever. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And if there is somebody, if some viewer here or wants to give a talk about ML.NET, please contact us. I'm happy to host this.
Yeah, but I guess, like just talking to people, a lot of data scientists use Python or other tools. But what .NET is really good at is in taking the things that the data scientists usually produce, like any machine learning frameworks, any regression models, and then putting them in production in a system somewhere. So, for example, if you train some models using Python, we can still execute it with CoreML in a production pipeline, and run it in the plant in a Docker container behind an REST API, something like that.
By the way, we had a talk on ML.NET, and this was one of the examples which was shown, like pre-trained model, like really extracted, saved, and so on, and then used later on in application. Yeah.
Cool. Good. Still have some topics for .NET 5. So we talked about WinForms VPF. Yeah, some quick ARM support and Mac M1. So new Mac platform is there. M1 status. It's not. It works with the Rosetta 2 emulation stuff.
Not yet, but a fix for that is in the works, and that will be backported to .NET 5. The native support for the Apple Silicon, that will have to wait for .NET 6. At least that's the current plan that I heard. But you will be able to run .NET 5 on the Apple ARM64 machine with the Rosetta emulation.
Cool. And ARM64 was... Is this now already there? There are so many ARM versions. Does anybody know which ARM version is now supported in .NET 5? By heart? A lot, or?
It depends on the operating system, but I think for Linux, you have ARM64 and 32-bit ARM. And for Windows, I think the new one in .NET 5 is also ARM64. So, yeah.
Cool. And on this, it's the question: are ARM processors still low power processors if they're when we look at the Apple Silicon? But in .NET 5, there are a lot of performance improvements. If you look in Twitter, I'm always fascinating when people posting their graphs and asking, when do you think we rolled out .NET 5? And they have a drop of CPU about 50%. Yeah, so performance-wise, .NET 5 is amazing. It was already .NET Core, between .NET Framework and .NET Core was already amazing. Where do you find the stuff to improve, Alex?
I don't know. We have a lot of smart engineers who just dive in and fix things. But I mean, it's not really anything special. You just take a profile and see what sticks out, and then you optimize stuff. So same as you would do in any application.
Mhm. Yeah, even for us, this worked. Like we had a process where we had like some custom test interface where we like upload Excel documents instead of receiving RabbitMQ messages for like testers to test things, and we were deserializing that into an object model. And of course, the better approach would be to like do some streaming processing of the documents, but yeah, it would just take some days to implement this, and this was actually failing in the backend with out-of-memory exceptions in Kubernetes because we would have to increase the container size. And I think we were now at 2 gigabytes for the maximum run, and just updating it to .NET 5 reduced the memory usage to around 900 megabytes from like nearly 2 gigabyte spikes. And it's even a bit faster. So thanks. I can put off that refactoring for longer.
That's also an option. Good. Good. I think we're nearly through with the .NET 5 topics. I'm just looking into the questions if I missed something.
I think there is one about Blazor. Any good
Yeah.
stories, experiences with Blazor?
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really have story about Blazor. The only thing I can say is I work on observability, and I played with previous versions to just build tracing into Blazor. And the big problem was that lots of libraries like HTTP client and stuff like that, I was unable to get the diagnostic source events, and based on that, I would create the whole tracing stuff. That was kind of missing because that was coming from Mono, was my understanding, and diagnostic source was just turned off. And now in .NET 5, it's there. So I see.
So are you talking about WebAssembly Blazor or server-side Blazor?
Yeah, WebAssembly. Sorry.
Okay.
WebAssembly,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. So the big thing with WebAssembly Blazor and .NET 5 is that the class libraries, so the BCL that it uses, is now the one from the unified .NET. And in previous versions, it was using the old mono-based one. So that's actually like one of the big advantages of Blazor WebAssembly in .NET 5. And we also got all of the performance improvements that have been done to the class libraries for free, basically, because it's just one implementation now. And that obviously, hopefully, will also be the case when we move Xamarin onto the same foundation. So lots of exciting stuff.
Cool. Good. So we're already 45 minutes in. Let's make a quick 5-minute break, and then let's discuss what is everything new in C# 9 and how this will affect our futures as .NET developers. So see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're back, and we have a plan. Okay, so it was now .NET 5. Now the big stuff. What's with .NET 5? C#9, and yeah, there are some cool new features there. What are your favorites?
So my favorite is actually not a language feature, but rather an SDK feature. And I'll just show my screen to demonstrate what I mean. So I have some code prepared that has a few issues. For example, we are seeing these IntelliSense recommendations like, yeah, there is something unused. And you're seeing these are basically some messages that are generated. And since Visual Studio supports editor config, we can also set these to configure this as maybe a warning, right? So Visual Studio then creates this editor config file, which sets this IDE diagnostic to a warning and displays the warning. But if I like try to build from the command line, this will actually never really show. Let's also do no incremental. So there are some new features in the SDK that are also available via Visual Studio, is that you can actually turn on code analysis settings. So for example, you can enforce this code style on build, which is actually something that you will get by default when you switch to .NET 5. So for example, this is a .NET Core 3.1 app. If I migrate this to .NET 5.0, I will get this by default. So if I rebuild this application, I should now be able to get more, first of all, more warnings. So, enforce code style and build and enable analyzers. For some reason, this should be enabled with .NET 5. Maybe I have
Visual Studio never
not been able to do
changing the TFM outside of its UI.
But what we will see now, there are these CA analyzers that are now coming in. Those are .NET analyzers. So for example, I should not throw an exception. I should always use the throw statement to rethrow an exception and not throw the exception again, which will mess up the call stack or the stack trace of the exception. But now I should actually be able to get these warnings in the build itself, right? So these IDE warnings or errors and CA code style errors can now be done in the build as well. And if I have additional analyzers, I can also deactivate them for one. So for example, if I have a lot of generated code, for example, if I have a project that only contains like entity framework migrations, there is also an option to switch off analyzers for the complete project. So I can turn off this run on build, and then all my code with like generated entity framework code will not run through analysis, even if I have additional analyzers like style copy installed. Also, just to keep things compatible, if you upgrade to a new SDK, and you may or may not get new errors. So you can also set this analysis level to like 5.0. So the .NET 5 SDK comes with a few rules, and I can keep them at this level, and to ensure that if people install new versions of Visual Studio or new versions of the .NET SDK, that I won't have like failing builds because there were new warnings introduced and maybe I configured some of them as error or all as error by default. So I like to keep that at latest to get everything. And also there is a new flag that you can also use in, I was editing the wrong version, so there are a few new CSproj settings. So enable net analyzers should be true for .NET 5.0 applications. I can also enforce this code style and build, which should also become true by default when you migrate to .NET 5. And I can also set the analysis mode to say, okay, please enable all analysis, like all warnings by default, which will generate a lot of warnings. So let's try that. Right, so I'm getting a lot more warnings and errors like removed unused. There is a private member that is unused, rethrowing exceptions. I should be using resource files instead of strings directly. And all of these can be set to a severity. For example, I can set the severity of this to none because maybe I don't like to use any resource tables. And again, this will be persisted in an editor config file, .editor config, and also the build process. So if I run .NET Build or use MS Build in my CI pipeline, this will now also use this editor config as a source for this configuration. So just to prepare you, if you upgrade to .NET 5, you may see new warnings being introduced by default, and you can use these mechanisms to deal with them. And then you can use a lot more language features, right?
Yeah. Maybe Martin, thanks so much for showing this. Definitely, thanks so much for showing this. You surprised me really nicely. I have a talk on the topic, like the full, like 1 hour talk on the topic of the linters and so on. I was planning to update it to the newest version of the tooling, Visual Studio and so on, .NET 5, and I'm happy how it evolved, that it became more and more prominent, because in practice, like I see that in general, like there are so many good linters out there built on top of Roslyn and so on, and the number of them are growing like really high quality, and I see them very less in practice compared to what they offer. Yeah? And
Yes.
the fact that the new Visual Studio, so they're getting more and more prominent and easier to integrate. Now it's just editor content, you know. There are no more like this additional XML configuration files needed and so on. It's the whole process of introducing them got much more smoother. So I expect to see them more and more like used in practice. Thanks a lot for showing this. Yeah, very nice.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I didn't notice this feature in the blog posts. Good. Good. That was Martin's top feature. What is the rest of you? What was your feature of C#9? Nobody's shouting records.
No, Andy, because
I wanted to shout record, but since I was talking so much now, I said, okay, let the other talk. Yeah. But if you want somebody to shout, then definitely records.
Records is nice. But let's first talk about top-level statements, right?
So I guess we have a demo now. So what's making demos easier?
Yeah, I can do some live typing. If you allow me, I can do some live typing. So definitely, maybe just I think records. Gergely said you prepare some examples, so you can show them. I can do just a short introduction. So in general, like in every version of the language, there are those different categories where we improve the stuff, like really significant new features, like records. They increase robustness, I would say, definitely, and expressiveness of the code. And there are then those tiny features where just, you know, improve the readability and similar. So let's start with the tiny features. So I think I can share my screen. That should work. Okay. So here it is. I'm going to do a bit of a live coding in SharpLab. Maybe an anecdote. Two friends of mine, one is a passionate Python programmer and the other one was Microsoft MVP at the time. And the Python programmer asked me to write a simple, hello world program and compile it on the command line. And Microsoft MVP didn't manage, because if you think of it, pretty a lot of things to write. Starting with .NET 5, there is .NET 5 with C#, 9. There is a neat feature called top-level statements, which gives you something like this. I will just do it quickly. It's not going to be the hello world. It's going to be just a hello. So this here is a valid C# program starting with C# 9. It's called top-level statement. So if you have this typical C# program, which usually looks something like this, it's going to be generated for you completely. You can really, focus on that one single line you want to write. It's perfect for the learning purposes, of course. So that means there is no need for all this clutter around if you want to start using C#. Also, if you're talking things like Jupyter Notebook and so on. But what I like about the feature, again, is this, for me, is a philosophical message behind it. The entry point to the program should be really like very, very small, some bit of a small wiring and calling, you know, just program.start, something like that. I'm saying this because I've seen program CS files which were like, I think the largest I've seen ever was 25,000 lines of code, which is pretty something. And if you get used to that, you know, none of this is needed. The only thing you need is just that what you want to start the application. It's pretty cool. You have here everything you actually need. So for example, arcs are there. So if you say something like this, you can use them. You can see that they're here inside as a feature provided, and live coding. And also, for example, if I say here, yes, now return 0 or something like that, you will get the different kind of main, and you can get also, you know, like I can await a task, and then it will become let's say task dot. Okay, in this case, I should include something with usings. I will not go that far, but it's a tiny feature, but I hope it's going to become the standard. First of all, in the templates, I hope that the new templates which will come will actually have this as a standard, that there are no clutter around anymore. So that's one, let's say, tiny feature which increases readability. But for me, this overall message, like, hey, you should keep your entry point very, very simple and small, which just run something. And in a proper architecture, if you think, for example, how ASP.NET or backends look like, that's more or less just that, start the web host. Yeah, good. I will use this feature to demonstrate another one, which goes into the direction of improved readability. And for me, it's a bit controversial. What can I do? I'll use datetime as a type. So this is the good old.
I'm sorry, Igor, you're muted now. Igor?
Still nothing, Igor.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, strange. I don't know what happened. I guess I pressed something somewhere.
Maybe.
So we are all used to this, and the feature called target type expression allows us to delete this actually, and still the compiler will compile the same thing. So it will deduce that this new is actually new datetime. For me, a bit controversial because it's somehow an opposite to that what we used to have with vars, actually, where the datetime was in this side with var here. But where I find the feature very useful are the things like this. Like let's say that we have something like this. I'm going to create a list of, I'm not going to be too data, let's say datetime again. And if I now do something like this, regular thing, what we are used to, and this was sometimes pretty annoying, that in this case, we were supposed to repeat the type all the time, if you know what I'm talking about. And this kind of code, you could see in practice a lot. In this case, having this feature is really neat. Like it removes the clutter significantly when it comes to collections in general lists. There are a couple of places you can use it, like in initializing properties and so on. But by the way, I'm writing a Visual Studio extension that helps you modernizing your code, and I did a bit of investigation, like in how many places in code this thing will be useful, and it's on a regular, let's say, realistic projects. I'm surprised how much readability you really get. So it's, let's say, one of those tiny features. It was a candidate for C#8 as well, but I didn't make it. But I'm glad that it's here in C#9. So there is no need to specify type when you write new if the type is obvious. The compiler can refer it. So two small features from my side, but let's jump on the serious one, the heavy one.
Cool. Yeah, so the next one, what I would like to talk about is records. And let me try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. How many C# versions did we had to wait on it? Was it C#6 the first time,
Yes,
or 7?
I believe the first proposal for a few of the features were in C#6, right?
Exactly. Yeah. First was C#6, and yeah, postponed so many times. It was the flagship feature through all of those versions. So, but finally there. Yeah, at last.
Yeah, so records are basically, so until this point we had classes and structs, and now there is a new thing called records. And I would say the basic idea behind this is that these are, you get, this is still a reference type like a class, but you have value semantics. So let's take a look at the example here. So we create one person here with first name, last name. And then we create another one, which is a completely different reference. But if we compare the two, then basically, yeah.
Can you zoom in a little bit to the code?
Yeah.
Of course. Of course. Is it better?
Yeah, looks better.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so that's basically I think that would be point one for record. So you have two instances, and if you compare those, then it basically does value comparison. So it looks into the properties into the record, and if those are equal, then those two are equals. Of course, if you do a reference equals between person 1 and person 2, then that's going to be false. I don't zoom in because this zoom in feature is broken on my Windows, so trust me, there is false there if this is too small. Yeah, so different references, but basically it does value comparison. Same if you want to do assignment, like if you assign one person to another, then again value assignment happens as it would happen with a struct. But again, in this case, this is not a struct. This is a record, which is actually a reference type. I think it's interesting to look at the generated IA code. Not sure if you can see this well, but basically, if you compile this, ignore the generic parameter, that's a previous version. That's basically a class what the compiler generates, and that derives from I-equatable person. Fun fact, F# also has a record type, and that generates very similar. That generates very similar code. Okay, so
I believe in the preview there was also a possibility to generate record structs, right? But I guess this was removed.
Yeah, I think that did not make it. I don't think that it made it into the final.
I think I read something about then. Yeah, postponed in a future version.
Mm-hmm.
Something rings a bell with the structs records.
Okay, so one thing when we already talk about like struct versus class, so you can derive from a record. So if you have from a struct, you cannot derive, but since this is a class, you can just create a derived class, which is sorry, I wanted to write student. And yeah, so basically inheritance also works with this. Other interesting thing about records is that this basically promotes immutability. So by default, I was a little bit confused because sometimes people say that this is an immutable type. That's not really true. If you have this, then you can, like, these are plain properties, and you can change those. So you can say first name, whatever. So that compiles, but there is a new language feature called init only property. And what it means is that this property, this first name, from that point will be, you can only initialize that when you create the person. So you can use the object initializer syntax. That's the only place where you can assign the value, but later you can't change this. So if you had, for example, a read-only property which you initialize in the constructor, this is basically the next step. You don't have to initialize it in the constructor, but you have to initialize it in this initializer syntax. And from that point, this is basically immutable. And there is another syntax here. So I have normal properties here, but I could just write string first name and string last name, and remove this whole thing after that. And that's basically almost the same, except of course I won't get properties there. With the initializer syntax, I can just do a normal constructor, and from that point we will have our instance. So that's basically the shortest way to write a record. Other fun fact I want to say is that, so this creates a couple of nice implementations. For example, the toString method, what the toString method does is that it has an implementation which just lists all the fields. So if we run this, this will just write the first name and the last name with a nice syntax. Like we have in our code base where I work, we have a lot of toString overloads where we just print the fields for debugging purposes, and this has it built in for us. So that's really nice. I guess I stop here. I think there are many other things, but is there anything that maybe others want to mention here?
Maybe for this feature as well, why I see very important from the design point of view. Again, did a bit of research on a huge code bases which we have. There's so many cases where actually what you want exactly this record, like an immutable structure and so on, but it's inconvenient to use it. Like I have to write a constructor and then assign the things and then that finally people simply write the property bags. Getters and setters are there, but they leave the door open, to break the immutability and so on. And we also had quite some bugs in that direction. So for me, this is a crucial feature, one of the crucial features, because it gives us really the opportunity to express now this natively. Basically, I want my immutable object, and in this nice example, if it's just one liner, maybe just to add it to this one line, we can still add methods inside and so on. So we can add functionality to it if we want. But the way how the structure is defined can be much simplified. Yeah. So it was in practice, I see it as one of the crucial features. Yeah.
And also speaking of in practice, are there some limitations? Like, can I already start using it in things like entity framework or in API contracts? Do you have any suggestions for that? Because honestly, I haven't tried it yet in production code.
Me neither. And someone asked this question, like, can I use it on an, let's say, ASP.NET Core controller as an input parameter? And I think the answer was yes.
For MVC, it's yes. The support is getting there in the frameworks as well. For this concrete one, for MVC, it works already, so you can use records.
Yeah, there are a lot of work that the serializer is still working. So,
the JSON serializer works as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
The text JSON. I mean,
this is just a class. So this is,
Yeah.
I think it's really worth looking at ILSpy, like what gets generated. This is really a class with I-equitable implementation. So it's like it's a reference type with value semantic. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how.
And I suggest simply try it out if it works. I tried it out last week in SpecFlow, where we have some helper methods that gets a type parameter with class, and I simply change it with a record, and it works. And this is some type creation and property filling code, and this simply worked. And this code is 10 years old. So try if records working in your use case, and yeah, it's in the back. It's a class with added features.
There is one related syntax which I haven't shown here. So let me just share again, and let's quickly talk about that, because I think that's interesting. So I reverted this back a little bit. So I still have my properties here, but these are init only properties. So remember, like we can change those afterwards. And the question is like, okay, what if I want to create based on this person? Like, let's say if I want to keep the first name, but the last name would be different on the next person. And for that, there is a syntax which I hope I don't mess up. You can just say p1 with, and then you can do this, and then let's say last name is like, I don't know, Buzz. There we go, seems to compile. Okay, so what happens here is that we create a new person, and again, remember, like if we would new up an instance, we couldn't change the first name or the last name. So what we do here is we say, okay, hey, take person one, so it will just set first name to foo, and we say with last name, so set last name to something else, like Buzz in this case. And with this with syntax, we can basically combine. So create a new instance by combining it with a previous instance. So that helps, because if you have init only properties, then that's a good way to combine instances. Yeah. Trying to
borrowed from F#.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Records makes, I think, modeling your application so much easier in the future, and you also, it removes from me a lot of boilerplate code, what you have with classes, and so yeah, modeling and creating specific types quickly for a use case is now a one-liner.
Yeah, there is a good question in Twitch, which is like, when would you use class, record, or struct? I already talked a lot about this. Does anyone want to answer that?
So I guess it's kind of blurry. Again, structs have also have gotten a lot of new features recently. Like you can now have read-only structs. You can have read-only structs that may only exist on the stack. And now there's records, which have some similarities with read-only structs. So again, the difference now is that a record now is always a reference type. So you can have reference equality. You can use it in things that do some change tracking, like in serialization. Some serializers would resolve loops by tracking things that are already serialized based on the reference equality. So I guess the line is really a bit blurry in here.
Yeah.
Again, with classes, you can have inheritance. So that's the main feature which you can't really do with structs. You can have inheritance with records. So if you have like a student that derives from person, that inherits from person, and you can more easily add new methods, and it should more easily fit into things that you already expect reference types and objects to be in. For example, Entity Framework Core, which I don't think has. I'm not sure if it has support for records yet.
I don't know that either.
I hope they get.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a bit of the distinguishment between like structs and
yeah, I think if you want to have like inheritance, but you still want to have value semantic, then just go for record. Like that's the perfect fit. Like I want to inherit, I want to have this, like reference type thing where I point from one to another. That's another reason. But still, if I compare them, or if I new up an instance, or like if I assign one instance to another, if I want value semantic, then record has it out of the box for you. And that wasn't the case previously. Like you had to create a class, implement a couple of things, but now you have it out of the box with record.
Yeah, I remember installing tools. Like one of the things I used ReSharper for was like generate equality, generate hash codes.
Hash codes, yeah.
All of the things you basically have to implement.
Yeah, and if you look at the compiled code with, for example, ILSpy, then you will see that those are exactly implemented as you would think in these cases.
And also if you're adopting things like these non-nullable reference types features that you can enable in C# so that you have nullable and non-nullable variables basically containing reference types. When I've done this previously, I've ran into lots of situations where we had these like kind of record classes that were not really record classes because they had setters. So if I was starting a new project, I guess I would also have a much easier time with basically nullable reference types, or actually non-nullable reference types, because I get these features now for free, because I have these init-only properties that I can do mutations on more easily or with less code, but still have an easier time adopting this non-nullable reference type semantics.
If I can add just a thing, so this is really well explained, like in terms of the differences and where to use which. I come back to the analysis I did on a code base. It's at least very interesting to see how many like those. I will call them DTOs in a broader sense. Like we have like property, like getters and setters only, like property bags, floating through the system. And actually, they were supposed to be mutable. Like somebody produced them and give it to somebody else and said, "Okay, here is what you asked me for." And for some reason, I mean, it's a natural thing. When a door is open, programmers start changing them on the way, introducing bugs eventually, and so on. So for like those simple DTOs, things that has to pass through the system, yeah, not being copied, so that we do not have struct semantics in terms of coping. So it's still reference semantic, but being immutable, yeah. And when it comes to mutability, of course, any kind of concurrency and so on, if you need data structures which are used in concurrent algorithms, definitely records will help. Like these are the two areas which I see in practice in the existing code, yeah. I'm curious, Andy, you said that you changed something to records in your example. What was it exactly like in a...
It was a DTO.
It was a DTO, yeah.
And yeah. One example where I tried it out was 3 DTOs, and yeah, 3 classes was reduced to 3 lines of code in one file, and I have no idea. 30, 40 lines of code could be removed.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Because ReSharper was mentioned, current normal release version of ReSharper isn't yet playing so nicely with the C#9 features. You need the early access program version, which can now C#9. So for our viewers, if you're wondering why you get a lot of errors, squiggles with the C#9 features, if you have ReSharper, try the beta version, the early access program version. One question I've always with this C#9 and coming to Alex, can you use these all nice features or when you're developing on .NET already, or how is it?
Yes, so we are pretty aggressive of updating to newer versions of the Roslyn compiler. So we are even consuming like nightly builds of the Roslyn compiler. So yeah, we basically use features like this as soon as they are available. Whether we use records, for example, I don't think there's anything in the BCL right now that uses records. But I think, yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Well, maybe to expand your question, Andy, this is a good question where these features can be used. So we were talking about .NET 5 and different versions of .NET, and you're talking about you're working on Xamarin. So the question is where these new features can be used. What's the prerequisite? So official documentation says .NET 5, yeah, but they can actually be used. It depends on the feature, what the feature needs from the other line, from the framework or from the runtime. But for .NET 9, C# 9, most of these features can be used also on previous frameworks. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically anything that doesn't depend on some runtime or library feature, which none of these are, it's just generated IL that basically runs on .NET Framework as well, or on Xamarin. Yeah, those can be used as well.
So records works on non.NET 5 projects.
Well, theoretically,
Theoretically.
whether it's easy is another question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are things like where the compiler looks for special classes, and I guess for records they look for this skip locals in it, or for some marker type that you could in theory provide yourself with the right library.
Then there's the dirty hex.
So, but yes, it's complicated to explain to people like what are language features, what are runtime features. So I guess the really easy thing is like update to .NET 5, you will get all the goodness by default.
What's not always easy if you have if you are a library author. If you have an application, that's another thing. But as a library author, I can't drop .NET Standard 2 or .NET Framework support yet.
Yeah, of course. Same here.
Yeah.
Cool. One feature on my list we didn't mention it, and perhaps this works. There are some pattern matching enhancements also in C# 9, and there are a lot of them there. But finally, I can write is not null.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally,
and you can write is not, and then in brackets like operation cancel exceptions or like text string or some other exception types.
Okay, you have to type this, Martin. I'm confused now. What can you?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Let me show you something which looks like a riddle. Or Martin, you have it already. Can you share it?
I would code it live.
Perfect. Even better.
So if I share my screen, you should see another instance of sharplab.io. So basically, if I actually can do this in a top level statement, if I have some console write line test, some code that I maybe would write a try catch around. And since we can do exception filters, like I can catch an exception, but only when the exception matches something, like when exception is platform not supported exception, or X is operation cancel exception, something like that, which I can now combine algebraically. So I can exception is one or the other. This is now a valid C# code, right? Or I can exception is not one or the other. So I can have new fancy logic, and as you mentioned, I can test if I have some string. I can also test if S is null, or my favorite one, if S is not null.
Can you write the one if S is not null or empty? Just write it down or empty.
Yeah.
Just continue. Or empty string.
Empty.
Empty. That's
and
it.
of course, no. Or string string.empty.
No, just make empty string like.
A const pattern, basically, yeah.
This is fine, yeah. As a constant, it will work. So S is not null or empty. So, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like a joke. It looks like a joke, but it's really, if you see nice examples, it's gotten really readable. So now I mean I love the feature, definitely. I remember when I was giving the first talk on pattern matching, that was C#7 at the time. It was such a like tiny feature compared to that what F# can and so on. It was like embarrassing to talk about pattern matching at all, you know, but it improved over time significantly, like from C#7 to C#8. And now with these conditionals, it's really neat. Yeah, the code really becomes like fluent, readable. Yeah.
Yes, so it's much easier to understand. All the cases where I've missed this bang in the front, when it's like, yeah, I sorry, I kind of missed that.
Yeah.
These like 2 characters. So it's much better. And even if I have some patterns, do you have more examples on pattern matching?
I have one which is more as a puzzle to show you that it can be less readable. It's intentionally done that way, and it's also a teaser to our talk in 2 weeks. So let me see where it is. Yeah, it's this one. So good luck in this in decrypting this.
What?
Yeah, it's valid C# code and it compiles. Yeah, believe me or not. Yeah, I'm gonna go left. I'm gonna go right. You know, less than 4, greater than 1. What is this? You know, so we're going to explain it in 2 weeks. But let's say that you have to be careful. Like this is intention done in a way that it's a bit, you know, makes you confused, not to misuse the feature. But the other way around, if you have like pattern matching compared with relational operators, you can again get something really nice, really saying like is greater than 1 and less than 4 and so on. So I will not explain this intentionally, but let's say that the feature can also, if you are not cautious, can lead to a code which is maybe not that much readable as you would want it to. Yeah.
Yeah. And also what I think is really cool is the compiler is actually checking that you basically have all your cases handled in this switch expression. So that is like also kudos to the compiler team for implementing all these safety checks, right?
Yeah, there was one question. Why is on left side 2 null? Not sure if it was now in your example, Igor, or in your Martin. Who has on the left side 2 nulls?
I didn't have nulls, I guess.
I believe maybe I had, but I'm not sure where. If you can paste the code or at a
That's the. It was in Martin. It was in yours, Martin's. Let's share it again with us.
Yeah.
96. I see more. String empty equals double quote and then arrow null.
Okay, so basically I've just prepared this variable, so this could come in from anywhere, and I was just describing variable different ways to check for null or not null value. Like I don't like to do if s not equals null, which is also very interesting because you can actually use operator overloading here to
Change the behavior.
tamper with null checks. So ideally, you should have always been testing this with as is object, which is not very fine. If it's not, if you know it's a reference type and not a struct, you could also do it like this, which is fun.
But is not null is really saying what do you want to do? Yeah.
So is not null is now the new way that I can always recommend you to use for null checks, because it will actually check if it's null or not. It's not. It cannot be tampered with implementing any custom equality checks or operator overloading. So this is really always a null check that you can use for reference types and non-nullable reference types.
Okay.
Right. And
we just ignore the right side where we now have an equals operator.
I'm sorry. But yes, the idea is this. So language features can be implemented in different ways, right? So, and one of them, the tricks that compiler developer use is called lowering, where you like implement new language features, which could in theory also be written in like the old language. So the process is called lowering, where they actually rewrite the code that you write to make use of older language features. And here you can see the code that the compiler actually generates, and you can see that basically, if we ignore this for now because there is an optimizer that knows that it's null here. For example, both of these if statements are the same as writing not equals null in this case. So that's basically lowered into this other kind of check. If the same is true if I have any like, for example, string interpolation, where I have this is then you import something else, string. Of course, this was always implementable with like string plus something. And if you're using string interpolation, the compiler is basically lowering this new language feature into this other code that is actually compatible with older versions of the runtime, and perhaps even existing code in the compiler that already exists. So that's the different ways in which language features can be implemented. This is also why Andy is asking the questions, okay, if I have this code, what kind of runtimes does it run on? Because the runtime only needs to know how to like concatenate strings for a new language feature.
I mean, for the runtime, at the end, it goes to IL. You can choose the IL on the top for the result. This is a lowering to C#, but if you go to IL, this is what the runtime gets, but it corresponds to this lower C# example. Yeah.
And maybe just one note: the C# view of sharplab is actually like a decompiled version of the IL. So it's not really like translating like the C# you see on the left to the C# you see on the right. It's always compiling to IL, and then the right view is just reconstructing it from the IL to something that looks like C#.
Yeah. So the right view, if you select C# in sharplab, is basically what kind of C# code this would look similar to. So it's not a view in the compiler. It's also I think using a different compiler framework to try to write C# code. And at the end, it's generating some machine code, which is also fun to read at points. Okay.
Yeah, good. The question was in the meantime solved answered in the chat. It was with the optimizer. Good. C#9. Any other features we have there? I think the big ones we had.
I want to add one. I mean, the generators, the source generators. Here is something which is I see it as promising. I have to say I was a bit disappointed when I saw the first implementation. I was like, what? This was not what we were talking about, because the first proposal to that language feature was something completely different. I will not go into details. Yeah, and that's what I was expecting also. even much more cooler. But I like on the other side this pragmatic approach, which was taken from the Roslin team and also from the language design team, where they produce a feature which is essentially simple, let's say, from the compiler perspective, but offers a lot of possibilities. So in its essence, you can write code utilizing Roslin that generates code based on the code which you have. So it looks a bit abstract, but if you think of the code generation in general, like in .NET, a lot of frameworks which you use, like all of you on a everyday base, like mocking frameworks or a typical example, they actually generate some code at the runtime. Like they emit code, it's usually IL in the background or whatever. And using those features makes them difficult to be properly like trimmed. And with code generators, it's possible to for a lot of these features to shift them to the compile phase actually, generating the code at the compile time. I like the feature. There is I've started a collection of, let's say, some of the things which people already did on the if you go to GitHub on the awesome Roslin page, there is a section for source generators, and you can see what kind of things people do with those source generators, and it's already getting very interesting. Yeah. So one of the typical things are you want to generate some types which are let's say something. Try to imagine that you don't have a record feature, okay, in a language, but you can put an attribute on your class, partial class, let's say a record attribute, and then some generator generates you all of those things which Gergely showed to us. That's the idea of it, and I'm really curious how it's going to evolve, because I expect from a lot of frameworks, for example, AutoMapper. I'm just right of my head, which I'm sure many of you use it. It generates code at runtime, and that code can be generated at compile time. Yeah. Removing also bringing the more performance at runtime, of course, and sorry, adding this possibility to explain to the framework that what can be trimmed actually in a better way. So this is a feature where I expect a lot to come, especially from library designers.
Yeah. Let's see. For me, the problem with source generators are that they are C# only. And so you that's so as AutoMapper, as would leave me out of the way. It's for .NET, so using source generator would limit it to only C#. So that's the problem. I have the problem in SpecFlow that we also support PP.
Pattern, exactly. SpecFlow is exactly the same thing. So the proposed pattern is actually added as an added functionality to C#, but always have the existing standards functionality as a fallback for the languages which do not support source generation.
Yeah, I'm already using source generators in the project. Works nice.
Oh, cool. What for?
For actually data builder patterns. So I can actually show a quick demo. So this is also, I published this on GitHub. So for example, if I have like some entity framework code, or like I want to write tests for classes that maybe aren't yet records or something like that, where I have like classes with a lot of properties, I usually like to have things like defaults. So for example, I want to use builder classes like address builder with a street, something like that, and then implement my tests based on variations on these defaults. So maybe like if I have an order without an address or without a shipping address, or an item in an order without a quantity, something like that I like to test, I usually like to use builder patterns. Of course, with C#9 and records, maybe we can use with syntax here. But until then, I was using these builder patterns a lot. So like person.withID, etc. So the idea is for this generator that I wrote, that if I add a new property, for example, a public string something cool. The idea would be that as soon as I save the code and I have this address, I can use with something cool, maybe without something cool. For if it's like a reference type, I can set it to null to generate some more readable codes, like readable test code most of the time. And then have still this builder patterns that will instantiate this object once. Always also try to use like the primary constructor if there is one. And this can be actually done in a generator. So I wrote a generator that looks for this generate data builder attribute and then emits these builder classes.
Martin, you had an open source project for this. Did you?
Yes.
Did you port it to the source generators or?
This is really now a C#9 source generator. So this is implementing. This is a generator. That is implementing iSource generator. And this looks at basically it iterates the syntax trees in this case. I'm still not sure if it's better to iterate the syntax trees because there are also some mechanisms where you can like traverse the syntax tree in a very efficient type if you just register to changes to syntax trees. But at the end of the day, it uses the semantic model to look up some things like, is this a reference type or a value type? Which constructor method should be used, etc. There are still some bugs in there. Like I believe if you add a get only property, you will break it. But I'm already using it quite successfully for making some tests easier to write. And this was basically my first experiment with source generators. And so at the end of the day, what you're doing is you get this source generation context and you can add source code to this context.
Is this available
somewhere?
Like is it available as a open source project on GitHub? Oh, perfect.
This is on GitHub.
Okay.
I can post the link in the chat.
And I think you can also look at the generated code in Visual Studio, right?
Yes, but only if I set a magic property that, of course, I don't recall.
But I think you can also do F12 on one of the generated methods.
Oh, does that work already?
I think it should work, but I'm not sure if it's shipped yet.
It works. Nice. Yeah, so basically, I'm generating a builder class that has like private fields to cache these values. It is constructible from another builder or from an instance. And then it has these mutation methods, which basically generate a new instance from this. So it generates a copy, mutates the private field, and returns this copy. And since these are the only methods you can use, this is also kind of a mutability context. It also makes sure that all the things that are actually non-nullable, if nullable code is used, it will also check that all the properties that are not nullable, even if there are reference types, are set. So it also does some checks. So if you forget to set something, you will get an exception. And then use the constructor for all the things that it can resolve to the constructor, and then assign the other values and return it once you call build. So this is kind of boilerplate code.
Yeah, and I spent too much time in the past to write these boilerplate codes.
Yep. Martin, thanks a lot for this. So you're going to end up on the awesome Roslyn page. This is definitely. I have to take a look at the product on the project. Looks really cool. Yeah, I'm also a big fan of the builder pattern. Everybody should be.
Good. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Thanks for sharing, Martin, the link. Good. As we don't have any questions more open and my topic list is done, I would say we're finished with this roundtable discussion for today. Thank you all to you five for taking the time today and discussing all these features and the stuff that's ahead of us. And yeah, as every year we have now in November a new .NET version. I see a repeated event coming up. I think it's really cool stuff, innovative stuff that makes writing .NET applications a lot easier for the future. It will be still hard work to get to the new features in already existing applications, but that's always the case. Any last words from you?
Try it out.
Try it out, yes.
Definitely. Try it out. Yeah. .NET 5 and C# 9. Try it out. Yeah. That's the homework.
Yeah, that's the best words to end this discussion. I still have some slides to show you. So yeah, thanks again, Alexander, Gergely, Igor, Martin, and Raoul for taking part in this. Thank you all that are trying to watching, and yeah, and they're still here after nearly 2 hours. Yeah, again, thanks to our sponsors, Microsoft, Tieto, JetBrains, and Rubicon. If your company want to sponsor us, talk with us. You have some general information about sponsoring on our website. All suggestions, we will find a solution. Next meetups for .NET Devs so the next is planned for the 15th of December. Its topic and speaker is not yet defined, but I just got before our meetup starts the speaker for January next year. It's about the UNO platform, the UI framework, toolkit, library to what's based on, I think, UWP Summer, which then runs on Blazor and I think everywhere. So I think the CTO of UNO will give a talk on the 19th of January. Looking forward to this. Yeah, that we can host meetups with cool topics. We would like to know which topics you're interested in. We have a GitHub repo where you can post your requests. Please do this if you have ideas. You don't need to, so it's only for ideas, and we are then searching for a speaker that can present something about this. So if you have something in mind, please create their issues. And please spread the word that we are there and sharing the knowledge. Invite your colleagues, invite friends, invite customers, tweet at us, not only DotNetDevs.at, but also the .NET Stammtisch Linz and the Microsoft user group Graz. And yeah, invite everybody that has something to do with .NET to our meetups. Because we'd like to share our knowledge with you all. Again, all the links where you can find us. The recording of this talk will go up in the next days. Let's see how long the upload takes to YouTube. And yeah, the last slide, the link to the feedback form. So we always want to improve our meetups, and for that we need your feedback. So it should not take longer than 2 minutes to fill it out. There's also the possibility that you take part of the shuffle of the JetBrains license. I think of the JetBrains license, and I will. I think until Friday it's open, and Okay, it's not yet open. I made a mistake, but it will be open until Friday. Always make the same mistake. So now the feedback form should work. Yes. At the end, you can take part of the shuffle, and I will send out next weekend then for the lucky winner the license. Good, and yeah. Yeah, it should work now. I always forget to set the date where it is expired. Good. Have all a nice rest of the day, evening, depending on your time zones. For us, it's 8 p.m. in the evening. It's now nearly end of the day for us. Yeah, have a nice day and hope we see us soon in the next .NET Meetup. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.